Hello everyone, and welcome to this presentation. We are both working in the R&D team of security of Odoo, and therefore our job is to track the vulnerability inside the code base and to prevent the introduction of new one. So this talk is going to be about unveiling the most common mistake the developer makes when they are developing on Odoo. So we are going to have a quick Q&A at the end of the presentation. Don't hesitate to ask your question there. And I'm going to start with a couple of reminders of the very basic feature of Odoo in terms of security. So as a starter, as a first layer of defense in Odoo, we have the access right. So that is the most common thing that you need to do and take care when developing an Odoo module. So the main goal of this is to restrict access to certain models to some of the user group that you're going to make, and therefore you want to avoid that a portal user can, for example, write on an HR employee that doesn't make any sense in any business logic. So that's the main restriction you want to make. This is the access right. As a second layer of defense, you're going to have the record rules. This is more for a fine-grained approach when you want to restrict some user to some of the records and not directly to restrict them to the model. So in the example I have behind me, you have the access to the CRM leads that you want the sales team to have access to their own leads and the sales manager to have access to any of the leads that are in the CRM module. I'll also remind you that these access rules are not trivial, so you need to take care when making them. First and foremost, the global rules are combined with an AND logic, and therefore you need to have all the global rule to match in order to have access. And on the other hand, the group specific rule need match with an OR, and that is simply because if you have multiple groups, you only need one of them to match to have access to the record. It makes sense if an admin has the right to see his own leads and all the leads, he has access to all the leads, obviously. Now I'm going to switch to probably one of the biggest entry points that you can use, that any malicious user can use. Whenever you're developing for security, you want to reduce the surface of attack. You want to make as little your application as little exposed as you can, and expose as little data as you can. And therefore, you need to make to take care when developing, because in Odoo, every function that you make public is publicly accessible by the RPC API. This means that any authentified user can call this function. Any function that's not prefixed with an underscore will be able to be called by any portal user. I have here an example of a mistake some developer can make when developing and forgetting that these functions are public. So in this example, we are using a token with a private API. So obviously it's a service that is going to be paid by the company, and you don't want to expose that to everyone. So I don't know if everyone sees here the issue, but it's pretty obvious that there is no underscore before the function. This means that any authentified user can use said function. Even more, we can see that the API key is fetched by a sudo call, and therefore there is no access right check done whenever accessing the parameter or the key in database. And therefore, any user can make itself an RPC call using any tool or even the front end if he wants to ask anything. Or I should have mentioned that the function goal was to generate product template using ChatGPT. And in this example, any user can therefore make an RPC call to ChatGPT and ask anything he wants to ChatGPT with the credit and the API key of the database owner, which is usually not the goal whenever you are making such a function. So what should have been done? It should have been more restricted. So in this is one of the way you can restrict it. So you make a public function that is callable by any external portal user, or any user, an end portal user, which has an explicit access right check to the right to write on product template. You usually want to only have these kind of people to generate product templates, so it makes sense that only them can use this API to ask ChatGPT for descriptions. I'm going to give the talk to my colleague.
So hi everyone. So now I'm gonna dive into the subject of the SQL injections. So it's the most classical of all the vulnerabilities. Like, it exists for many years, and not only in Odoo but in every software in the world. And you might think that in 2024, like there is no more developer, all developers know about it and they know how to not introduce SQL injection. But in the reality, we see them quite still often. Like during the reviews, we catch them. At Odoo, it's even caught during the CI security. So when you commit a new feature on the run bot, there is a SQL injection detector that will detect automatically that you introduced a SQL injection. So obviously it shows that as we need those automated tools, that there are still developers not careful enough with their SQL crafting, and so we need to pay attention, and we will do a reminding of SQL injection today. So in this example, there is multiple things which are very, very wrong. The first is that it's callable from the API. There is no underscore at the beginning of the method, so you can call it publicly from the API. And you have also that res ID parameter that the user can freely use. Like you can put any arbitrary values in there. This is not the first mistake, but this is the first entry point that will lead to the injection later. Then the SQL which is crafted is not using the query parameters. It's using directly the Python templating, so there is no escaping at all. So in this case, the res IDs that we can pass arbitrary can be used to inject SQL injections. Here I have underlined where is the issue. So you see the res IDs that was sent on the very top. The templating using the percentage of Python, so this is how you construct a Python templating string in Python, and it will not escape anything. So if the user injects SQL statement within his parameter in the res IDs, he will be able to obtain whatever he wants through the SQL injection. Actually, if you are careful enough to see, there is actually two SQL injection in this one, because there was the res IDs on the top, but it's also fetching a list of email in that blacklist list. And if the user is able to control that email, and in this case it's simply subscribing to a blacklist, so you could put any email you want, and there is no validation of the email, like you can put something else than an email and do SQL injection within the email, you would be able to inject SQL as well through that parameter. So two mistakes, how to fix them now? No, first, what you can do. So what an attacker can do, in this case, we replace the res IDs, so which was supposed to be a list of IDs. In this case, we pass an arbitrary string, where you can, in this case, looking for all the passwords. The injection starts with that one parenthesis and comma, semicolon, sorry. This is to end the first query that was before. So in this case, it was to end the parenthesis there where there was the percentage S. So you first end the previous one, then you introduce yours that you want to see. So in this case, it's to retrieve all the passwords of the database. They are encrypted, but still it's not a good thing that they are able to get encrypted password. And this is what we call a SQL injection. So how to avoid this? In this case, what we recommend to all the developers is to use the framework whenever it is possible. In this case, there was no need to use a manually crafted SQL. You could have used the framework and it was good enough. There are cases where you want manual SQL crafting, for instance for performances, for instance if you want to do joins which are not possible through the framework because it's not yet supported. Maybe you want to access a field which is not available through the framework and you want to do it manually. So there are good reasons, but in this case there was no good reasons. If you absolutely need to do a manual crafting of SQL, then you should escape your parameters that you send to your SQL statement. How to do this? When you do a cr.execute, the last parameter are your parameters, and if you go through this instead of Python templating string, they would get escaped correctly. We also added, since Odoo 17, the SQL wrapper. So in addition to the CR execute, you have that SQL wrapper, which is a very powerful tool to write safe manual SQL. One of the most advantage compared to the regular CR execute parameters is that in this one, you can pass identifiers, such as name of columns, name of tables, etc. This, you couldn't pass as parameters in the regular cr.execute. With the SQL wrapper, you can. So this is a pretty neat advantage. Also, you can combine SQLs between each other. So there is an example at the very bottom where there are multiple SQL being injected into each other, and this allows a cool thing for the inheritance mechanism. Let's say that you want in your custom module to edit or modify a SQL statement from the standard. With this, it's quite easy because you can combine them with each other. You can even go as far as joining columns with doing a join of an array with a SQL where you see that there is only SQL and the comma and then a join of the columns, and it will escape everything automatically. And so this is how to write safe SQL in the code. Actually, we are asking developers to always use a SQL wrapper from now on, and on the run bot, it's automatically detecting if you don't use the SQL wrapper correctly, because there are still ways to use it badly. If you, for instance, again use Python templating within the SQL wrapper, but this would be detected automatically by our CI security. And so it's quite impossible, like nearly impossible to create a SQL injection if you use correctly the SQL wrapper. Then the next subject is about sudo. So for people who don't know Odoo that well, sudo is a way to elevate your privileges temporarily. Let's say that your user doesn't have access to a token field, and you want to be able to read it to craft an URL using that access token. You would need that sudo to temporarily elevate your privileges. In this case, so we are in the context of a root which is supposed to receive values from a form. In this case, it's the values of the profile form of the user, where he can change his email, his password, things which are legit. Like a user, he can change his password and everything. So here, you have the post parameter, which is supposed to hold those values of the user. And then, a bit lower, you have a sudo followed by a write using those values. So far, it doesn't look so unsafe, except that there is no control, there is no check of that post parameter, so it's a dictionary which can hold anything you want. And so the user could write his password, his email, but any other fields he wants as well on his profile. So here I underline it. You have the post with the keywords, which are directly sent to a sudo write immediately, and there is no checking. So what you can do in this case, you call the API, it's a bit long, but you call the API and you can write any field you want on your profile. You will say that it's not so dangerous, that a user can write on any field of his profile. Well, you don't know what he has access to, you don't know all the fields which are available on the profile. And for example, there is one which is the description, which can hold HTML content. And so a user could inject HTML links into his profile. A salesman going through that partner form would like to click on that website because he thinks that it's legit, and then it's the beginning of phishing. In this case, it was only writing on your own users, but there are other cases where you can write on anything. How to solve this? So it's to do a kind of checking of the fields you can pass. So in this case, it's a whitelist where there is only name and email that you can pass. And this is safe because you control the values that you are passing, exactly the ones you want. Here is a second example of a misuse of sudo, which is way more sneakier. And in this case, you see that there is the context of this one is to be able to read your last messages, your own last messages. And there is a domain that the user can control to be able to search through his messages. There is nothing wrong there. When you want to search into your mailbox, you want to be able to search, to send your domain, to make criteria to find the emails you want. The problem here is that there is a domain which is a force domain in this case, which is supposed to restrict you in your own messages and not on all messages of the database. The problem lies in the combination of the domain. The first one is combined with a simple plus with the domain of the user, and there is no control. And it can lead to what we like to call a domain injection, where you can force an OR in the domain, in the first domain, the user domain, that will override whatever you ask in the fourth domain. So you will be able to bypass the protection. This is how it would look like. So you would start your domain with a OR, and then you would ask, I want the messages containing the keyword password, and then the rest. Except that in this case, it will do that. I want the messages containing password or my messages. So you would be able to read any message you want with this flow. And this one is way sneakier. It's very, in a review, it would have been hard to see. So this is to showcase that sudo can be very dangerous. How to solve this in this case? You use the framework tools. And in the framework tools, we have what we call expression. And expression allows to control your domain, to combine your domain. In this case, you can use expression.end to make sure that it's an end. You can use expression.or as well in other cases. Why is it safer than the plus? It's because the expression.end will validate each of the domain independently. And each of the domain needs to be a valid domain. And in this case, this domain alone is not valid because there is something missing. There is a or, there is an end, and there is only one leaf. There is something missing. So this is how you make safe such a combination of domain. What it can lead, a wrong sudo, an unrestricted sudo. You can read password, you can read whatever you want in the database in some cases. You can write on fields. Let's say that you would be able to create a new administrator and then you have full access to the database. So a not safe sudo can lead to very critical vulnerabilities, and so it's very important to review them very carefully. I will hand over the speech to Florian.
We are going to finish with an example of an XSS. So an XSS happens whenever you try to render on the front end a value that was passed from another user or any other source that is in control of the user. We have an example here. In this example, you can see that we try to render something that is first fetched from the database. So the first few lines is an RPC call to get data from the database. So we get the name and the phone number of an user. And after that, we are going to add them to the HTML body of the page, and we do it in an unrestricted way. So we're going to put that value exactly as it is inside of the HTML body, which means that we are also going to be able to pass any HTML tags and an HTML script with the script tag, and therefore we can manipulate the working of the front end or take a full takeover of the front end of the user that is going to see this HTML page. This can be displayed by any user in the database, also an admin, and whenever an external user takes control of the front end of an admin, it can cause a lot of damage to the database. So obviously what's wrong in this case, I just said, you have a name that is fetched from the database, and you put it directly into the HTML body in the DOM of the page. So what it allows you to do, you can simply create a user that is called ABC script something. And whenever the page is going to render that name inside of the voice over IP applet, you're going to see that the script executes, and in this example, we can see that we have the hello world that we set in the script to alert us. So obviously, you don't just want to say hello world to the admin. That will not make very much sense. In this case, what can be achieved is you can also make any request to the backend. Remember that any fetch request that is done from the front end will be done with the cookie session of the admin or with the current user that is seeing the script. And therefore, in this example, we crafted a payload that is going to call the create function of the REST user, and we can see that we create a new user called foo with his password foo and with group admin. So we effectively make the admin create a new admin with a controlled username and password, and that the attacker can then use to log into the database as an admin and pretty much do whatever he wants after that. So obviously it's bad. You don't want this. And how can you avoid this? You need to escape your data. So any data that is unsafe and provided by the user, you need to escape it. So we use this small function called escape, and in this case you can see that we even put all of this into a markup to specify that it's HTML, and then inside of this markup we put escaped value for phone and name. And therefore this only display as a string and no longer as an HTML tag, and therefore it won't execute any script that is inside of this simple string. And I think that wraps up our presentation. I would like to finish with this small sentence that hackers only need to get it right to go out of damage, but we need to get it right every time. This makes our job very complicated. And now we are open for the little Q&A, and we are going to answer any of your questions.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, so thank you guys for the presentation. Here is the first question. If you are creating a custom endpoint or route in Odoo for an external system to request to, what is the best type of auth to use?
I would say there is no best type of to use. I will just say that your secret and key needs to be protected so that they don't leak from the database, and you need to have the strict control of the path that is used whenever the connection is made, in order to not allow any other user to use your connection with the external service in malicious way. So as we said, use restricted RPC call. Try not to over sudo it, or make sure that the sudo is at the right place. And the way you're going to interact with the external service mostly depend on the external service itself, because not all of them support all of type of authentication.
All right, thank you. The second question is, what about using a library to prevent SQL injections by generating SQL queries in Python?
Actually, this was what this was done before. Like there is a wrapper already provided by, I don't know, PsychoPG2 and everything. We just made our own to have more control, to be a bit more powerful. But yes, there is nothing wrong using an existing one. We just made our own.
Thank you. Then we have a first person thanking you for the very useful talk and asking, are you planning to launch e-learning or smart class for this?
I already got the question on my talk on Wednesday, and I think there is a quite huge demand for this one, so most likely we will do a smart class for this. If there is a huge demand and it will make the world a safer place, I guess we will do it.
Great. Next question, can security tools be run locally for detecting SQL injections?
These tools are mostly hidden, because we exposing this tool to the public will also show everything that we care about and watch out in the code, and probably give too much information about what we consider to be critical or at risk. And I'm not sure we want to publish this tool in a completely public manner, but any public pull request that's made on the GitHub of Odoo is going to be checked by this tool anyways.
Okay.
I was going to add that the SQL injector, if I'm not mistaken, it's within the open source code.
Indeed.
So this one you can run locally, just the SQL injection detector. And for the CI security, indeed, there is no way to do it yourself currently on your own repositories, etc. We might provide it one day, not the full version, but the most simple things that we check. As he said, there are some very critical things that we don't want to see, but maybe we can do a balance between what we can share and what we want to keep secret. So maybe it will come one day. For this one, for the CI security on the runbot, we don't share it yet, but maybe it will come one day. I have no clue yet. But for the SQL injection detector, it's already available in the source code, so you can already run it on your code.
Okay, thank you. Then another question, a lot of security checks are part of runbot security, but can I use it for my own modules?
Same question.
Okay.
It's about the same question.
Okay. Then, do you review Odoo apps on Odoo App Store for security?
This is a trick question, because it's something very recent that we started to do. I think it started around the middle of last year. We mostly don't check security on apps.odoo.com, but it can happen that we get external report from some apps that are when people show us vulnerability inside of the apps of Odoo.com, apps.odoo.com, we at that time block them, contact the developer, and try to find a way with the developer to fix the app in question. And recently, we've started to look more proactively into some of the top sold one on the apps.odoo.com. But it's not something that we do generally or at every single app that is published.
Yeah. I will add that doing such a thing, like checking all the apps on the App Store, it asks a lot of resources. Like it's a lot of developers, and this is why we don't do it, because we don't have enough developers to do this. They do it at Apple, for instance, on the Play Store as well, but they have an army of developers which we don't have yet. And hiring developer, it's quite a challenge, as you may know. So we would like to do it, it's just we don't have the resources now yet. So what we started to do is to take the apps which are the most downloaded ones. So we started to review, for instance, the connectors which are downloaded millions of times. Those we started to check. But for the small apps used by only a few users, unfortunately we don't have the resource yet to be able to review them fully.
Okay, thank you. And I will ask a last question. Is there an automatic check for security issues on Odoo SH staging range?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, the CI security is not on Odoo SH, and I don't think it would be possible to add it, because it would mean that we have to make it public again. So maybe it will come when we will do that thing where we split what we can share and what we cannot share. But for the moment, no, there is no security check on the Odoo SH.
Staging. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.